Hello friends, and welcome back. Before we get into this week's development diary, I'd like to say thank you. Last month was the first month of running the channel, and in the 28 days average, we've already hit 3,000 views on the video. That is amazing and way better than I expected, so I'd really like to thank everyone who came out to watch some of my silly content and some of my more serious content. So thank you very much, and let's jump into the development diary. So, on Tuesday, my morning started like this. I woke up, I'm laying in bed, and looking for my Crusader Kings development diary, and there is nothing. Ridiculous, right? nothing to read. How can I start my Tuesday? And of course, there was also people commenting on their forums. Where's our development diary? Well, we finally got it a bit late on Tuesday, just a bit. And it seems like they may or may not have appreciated all of our sarcasm. But this development diary is a bit different than what we've gotten in the last two. There is a little bit less about the systems and the functionality, but actually some of the events that are coming in here. Now, what they're introducing is what looks to be a revamp of the character type events. Now, these are the events that can, when they can occur and the game continues operating around the event. So the game doesn't have to pause. And because of these restrictions, they had to be really, really small. So let's go through this slightly late development diary. Welcome, comrades. In today's not at all late, shut up, dev diary, we'll be going over the new court type event. Many of you will likely have seen them a bit already in a few preceding diaries, but for the rest, allow me to formally introduce the court type events. So yeah, this is something that we've seen, and they haven't directly addressed. The noob type event is exclusive within the court, where they replace standard character type events. So right here, they're saying that they replace the events. We added these because one of the major limitations with character type events is that they're small, really small, and having comparatively less space to work with means they impose a lot of restrictions on their use. Those who mod, which I haven't modded the game, or dabbled in modding, will likely know that what I'm talking about. Generally, a character event can only fit in about 3 paragraphs of copy and 3 to 4 options before it starts to look a little naff. Less if there are characters or titles involved with very long names, or if you have to do a lot of paragraphing. Yeah, this is something that I noticed when we went through the one of the total conversion mods, that things started to get a bit off in some of the dialogue boxes. And there's good reason for them to be small. They get in the way less when popping up. It encourages concise delivery of information, and it frames a portrait character in each event nicely. For the court scenes, these considerations are generally moot. So we want to play around with a more liberal format. We don't need to worry about framing characters in the traditional sense. We show them in the scene. The players always opts into the court events and thus can't have one pop up unexpectedly. And though information and options still need to be reasonably concise, it's nice to have a little room to flex the meaning of concise somewhat. Alright, so once we come over into the image over here, we can definitely see what they were talking about, that they can frame the characters differently, right? On the right-hand side, they have the dialogue box tucked away out of the way, but still available and still seen. And then they have the characters in a conversation, right? And then you see the background being filled out by other characters in the court, right? Maybe they're listening into the conversation. Even if they're not listening to the conversation, just having those characters in the background or not having them in the background really adds to the ambiance and to the event, right? So by having an empty room, an example, as no background characters, it would seem like having a late night meeting maybe between the two characters they don't want anybody else to know about, right? Or so maybe this is a late night meeting, more of an intrigue meeting in the court, right? By not having those background characters. Or maybe it's a rushed meeting, right? Now, I'm going to jump over here for a second, and we'll actually look at the dialog box. So the dialog box is pretty similar to the normal dialog box. It's definitely bigger. That's one thing that you'll notice right away. It's bigger. There's more space to actually put text in. And on the left-hand side here, they'll have representation, the portraits of those who are involved. Hopefully that you can highlight over these portraits and actually see who this is involved, who's there, so that you can see, okay, well, this is me, this is my vassal, this is my spy master, etc. And you can just quickly see who these people are, and then reference them to the characters in the court. And then you have your standard options down here with your stress gains. It would be in red, blue for your stress losses. You would have your, as we've seen in previous development diaries, you would have any options over here for skill tests or traits. All right, now the next one that we're going to go over to is this one here. Now, this one actually adds something really awesome to the court that I'm really happy about. And I'm going to just quickly jump over here for a second. Okay. So, and I wanted to do that because I was covering up the king here, right? The realm leader. I assume he's a king. Once you see these two in frame, you really see the effect of the dwarf trait now, right? You've never seen someone's relative size. And even without those traits, you never really seen someone slightly shorter than the other person when they're talking to each other, right? It really adds to the flavor of the event by understanding of who's talking to each other, right? We have this bishop here, or archbishop, who is a dwarf, right? And you can actually see that he is quite smaller than his liege, but clearly by the position here, his liege respects him a lot. So this is a very interesting image here, and I'm really happy that they included this, and it makes me really excited just for the flavor that we're going to get with the Royal Court expansion. And of course, if you're very happy with this video, please hit that like and subscribe button. It helps me out a lot. Now, one thing don't remember if these three banners up here were ever mentioned. And in this one, the first one's highlighted. And in this one, the first one's also highlighted. It seems to be a court symbol. I wonder if these are different rooms within your court. This could be like your artifacts. This would be your throne room. What would this be? So this would be like your artifact display, throne room, and announcement room, like where you announce someone coming into the court. Yeah, that would make sense. Okay. Now, if all of the events are opt-in, then the malicious actor situation that we had speculated on, would it be possible? Now, this would also negate the penalty for refusing audience, because you could just sit the event there and just ignore it, right? There's no purpose to actually look at it until you're ready to see the audience. I suspect that the event types that they are discussing here are slightly different than the ones that they were talking about before, and maybe there are multiple types of events within the court. Okay, let's move on. I think we've delved into that as much as we can. From a player's perspective, you'll mostly interact with the court type event through the not at all confusing named court event pool. Similar to random yearly court events, reflect the life of your court just existing, with all of the petty drama and courtly intrigue you'd expect from medieval monarch's household. They primarily involved characters consistently within your court rather than far-flung vassals or guests, and often tie into court grandeur and your different levels of amenities. Interesting. So there will be a regionality to your court. So say that you are in Britannia. You have conquered Africa, right? The African vassals sounds like they would less likely to visit your court, which kind of makes sense. Other than their tone, size, and occasional number of options, the biggest difference the player will notice are the usage of different camera angles, shots instead of backgrounds and portraits, and their optional nature. Unlike yearly events, court events are opt-in, meaning they don't have to be taken if you don't want them to, in which case their default neutralist options will be selected after a longish time out period. Open a court event, you simply click on a button that'll appear floating over one of your court's relevant characters. Whether you've got court events you could be checking, you'll be notified by the Royal Court button in the right-hand panel. Yeah, so this is just the right-hand panel right below the event, and it looks like they have a new option. Right now, it kind of looks disjointed from this entire menu. kind of hope that they integrate it with this menu, but to me, this definitely looks a bit disjointed. Maybe that's what they're going for. I'm not going to go through the scripting portion. Now, in the scripting portion, they went through and they discussed that it is a bit tricky to code these events, and it was better for them to put a sample, which they put forward. Fortunately, I haven't modded before in Crusader Kings 3, so even looking at the code, even though I kind of understand the code, I don't actually understand like what they're saying in here, so there's no way I can accurately comment on it. One thing that they did say is every court type event must have a button character. So what this is telling me is that there is no characterless events. It always has to, at a minimum, include you, whichever character you are. That was the big takeaway I got from most of this, that affected non-modders. And it doesn't really affect players. It's more that it's just interesting that you won't see non-character events. Finally, for some fun, let's have some more court events. All right, I'll put a link in the description to this development diary. I'd highly recommend going through and reading the description or the different events here. Now, one of the concerns I have is that the current event systems, when I was going through and doing achievement runs, it started getting really stale to me. So all the events, they sort of blended together. I was just clicking through buttons, and basically I've gone through most of the events. Once in a while one pops up that I haven't seen before, and then I'll go through it, but that's very rare. I hope that they allow modding into the achievements for events, as long as they do not give you some sort of bonus, right? If you're just putting flavor in there, I think that would be really good for them to add in, to allow mods to affect that. We could load in some additional lore, some additional events, and it could just improve and fill out the game a bit more once the game starts getting a bit stale for you with the default events. All right, now for the next thing. Now this is a very small thing. They're redoing the duel system. All right, I titled the dev diary and friend too, didn't I? Well, the new court type event isn't the only event type we are adding with this expansion, just the most exciting. We also have the new duel type event. Well, they're not really adding this is kind of already in. What they're doing is they're revamping it in a very good way. Okay, duels were added as part of our first flavor pack, but I'm sure you've noticed that the space for them is pretty limited and the animations don't work so well for this context. Well, we've revamped both of these with the new type, giving duels a facelift, and they definitely look a lot better. So that's kind of cool. Now, this development diary was less about the systems that we're going to be interacting with and more about the event types that we're going to be interacting in, the different design perspectives that they're taking to the events, which is really cool. And I'm hopeful that this expands it and makes the current event system, and makes the events a little bit less stale than they currently are. And of course, I wish you a good morning, good day, or good night, wherever you are.